All right, good morning. My name is Megan Wu, and I am here to talk to you all today about motivation, metrics, and user awareness. So, just a little bit about myself. I currently work as a senior associate for Urbane Security. I've been in the information security field for about 10 years, and in the community longer than that. Truth be told, this is a bit of a passion project of mine. I love psychology, and I have for a really long time. A matter of fact, I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen this show, but in the 1990s, there was this show called Profiler, and it was like CSI before there was a CSI. There was this psychologist who would go out and try to figure out why the serial killers were going to go out and do what they did, murder people. And I became fascinated. I started thinking about why are people doing this? And then that started my love for thrillers and suspense novels and movies. And I would just consume all of that junk as much as possible. And was convinced that when I grow up, I'm going to be just like Ally Walker, forensic psychologist. It will be awesome. Until about 5th or 6th grade, I was volunteering at a hospital where my dad worked and was pushing a patient to get a blood sample drawn, and I passed out. So I don't know if you guys knew this, but if you're going to go into forensics, you need to be able to stomach blood. So I was 13 years old, going through an existential crisis about what I was going to do for a career, because what I wanted to do was no longer viable because I passed out. So I kept volunteering that's Bay Pines Veterans Hospital in Tampa, Florida, where my dad worked, and I kept volunteering with him, working with computers, and that's how I fell in love with technology, and then eventually computer security. And I just figured, my obsession with psychology would just be good for figuring out who done it before the big reveal in a movie or a book and annoy my husband to death. And that was going to be the end of it, right? And that was the case for a good 20 years or so, until 3 years ago at Derby. I was hanging out with some friends, just drinking, talking, and I told them about this passion for psychology and how interesting I found it. I didn't tell them about Profiler because I'm like, this has not aged well. You shouldn't watch it. I'm like, why don't they just call each other on the cell phone? Oh, that's right. So I told them about this, and then many drinks and hours later, I was like, oh man, what would be really cool is if I could use psychology to help people be more secure. And it was like an aha moment for me. So I went home, started researching college degrees, and started on my master's degree in organizational psychology. And found it really interesting. We talked about learning theories, motivation, habit formation, all this kind of stuff that kind of fuels this talk that you're here to see today. And it just befuddles my professors when I'm like, oh yeah, this can help with phishing and decision fatigue and et cetera, et cetera. And they're just like, I don't know what you're talking about. You people lie to each other to protect information? I don't understand. So it's a lot of back and forth with my professors, making sure that they understand so they don't give me a failing grade. All right. So I want to start off with something a little easy. Some of us might be a little hungover, and that's fine. If you're in charge, raise your hand if you're in charge of security awareness or user awareness in general at your organization. All right, cool. A lot of you. What if you're a consultant who's trying to help your customers improve their awareness programs? Cool. All right, we have a good mix here. How many of you who are either in charge of your own programs or are consultants, how many of you solicit feedback from the users? Okay. What kind of stuff do you usually look for from them? You can just shout out, it's fine. Ease of use? Okay, like whether or not they understood the delivery of the information and that kind of thing? Yep. Good. Because a lot of times when I talk to folks, they're just like, why would I ask the customer, or why would I ask my users If it's useful, we're just going over our policies. They mostly do it to check the box. Oh, we have to do our user awareness program once a year. We have to send them our policies once a year so that they understand it, and so we don't get dinged with a fine. And we're kind of wrapped up in this kind of narrative that we've created that users are the weakest link. It doesn't matter what we do, or, what we do is important because the users are the weakest link. They're stupid. They're just going to click everything and break everything. So we need, we're the big fighters. We're here to protect them. But it's alienating. If we keep talking like that and they hear that and they can't pick up that tone when we believe that and say it enough, they're not going to work with us. They're going to kind of dismiss us as the police or the bullies, and we're not going to get anywhere. So I really agree with InfoSec Sherpa here, who said a couple of months ago, technically a couple of months ago, it's June, that we need to stop calling users the weakest link. We have this ego thing in InfoSec, and we just kind of got to drop it a little bit. Because what we need to do is we need to enable our users to make better decisions. We need to give them the information that they need to make smarter choices, to go home and use different passwords on different accounts, or maybe sign up for a password manager. And then they'll bring those things into the workplace. So one of the first things that we should look at doing is collecting feedback and metrics about our awareness programs, so that way we can improve. Because one thing that helps us maintain the status quo of user awareness programs are awful, and then, this silly debate that comes up every once in a while that, oh, we need to get rid of user awareness programs because they don't do anything, or no, they're the best, we need to keep doing them. It's going to keep going on and on until we change something. And one of the ways that you change something is by collecting enough information so you know how to change it and why you're changing something. And as of right now, we have a couple of folks who are like, okay, I want to know how easy it is for them to digest this information, or is this useful to you? But for the most part, in most organizations that I've consulted with, they stop at phishing as their main metric. They're like, oh, user awareness is successful if we get fewer clicks on the link this quarter. And while that is a good metric, it isn't the end-all be-all that we try to think of it as. So this is Joel. Wolfe can look at it and be like, ha, it's Joel. So Joel is a very dear friend of mine and former coworker who unfortunately couldn't be here today. So that's why I chose one of the worst picks of him possible. And he told us about this story about how he worked for a company and he was put in charge of their user awareness program. And they were kind of trudging along before, not really making any changes or doing anything. Everybody's taking pictures and sending it to Joel, and I love it. So they were just trudging along, not making much progress. They weren't seeing any sort of return of investment with their user awareness program. So what Joel did was he sent out a customer satisfaction survey kind of thing to the users and said, okay, how useful was this? Did you understand everything that we talked about? Is there anything else that you'd like to see? What have you heard on the news that you think we could talk about next time? And what he found was by doing this, they could not only improve the content and delivery mechanism of their user awareness program, but they started seeing fewer clicks on their phishing, which, is the common thing. But he also found an increase in reporting of incidents because he spent extra time with the users saying, okay, we set up this email, sent it out everywhere, made sure that they understood what the email was for, and said, okay, if you see something suspicious, just send it to us. It could be anything. It could be just, a missing picture, broken link, what have you. Just let us know about it. There's nothing too silly. And he found a rise in legitimate incidents being reported that were previously going unreported. And then I had another customer who previously had done nothing, and they went to create a really robust user awareness program. And so in Rapid7, what our team liked to do was create code names for our customers so we could talk about them without outsiders knowing who we were talking about. So we had this hospital customer that I named Gold Star because they always wanted, like, oh, what's the best practice? How do I do this? And then we would give them these random recommendations once we exhausted the common ones of, oh, asset inventory, hardware, hardware, software inventory, you need that, vulnerability management. They're like, okay, and they would just implement it. It was so weird. We've never had that happen before. We're like, oh, you actually listened to us. Okay, well, here you should implement metrics and lunch and learns. And then they started doing it. And it was like, oh, okay. So that's why we call them Gold Star, because they really wanted that Gold Star. And what they found was by increasing lunch and learns, they moved away from the annual user awareness trainings, did more lunch and learns. Their security team invited their IT team over to have info sharing sessions. If one of the security folks went to a conference, they would have a hour or 2 hour lunch, invite all of IT, help desk included, SOC guys, what have you, and say, oh, hey, this is what we learned. This is the kind of thing that we talked about and what other people are seeing. And that information kind of filtered through the rest of the organization. And what they saw was by switching to the lunch and learns instead of the, computer-based training for, once a year, is their quarterly password cracking exercises took longer and longer before they got a hit. People were choosing stronger passwords. Again, decrease in phishing, that sort of thing. And it was really interesting because they were just like, oh, we've been trying to do this for years. And they just kind of like brushed us off. So we need to think about what metrics make sense for our organization, because there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. Just like the user awareness delivery methods, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So those were just 2 examples for a couple of ideas of metrics. Here's some others that I've seen around. Again, relevance of content to users. Asking users, what do you have questions about? What's this blockchain thing? Do I need to care about blockchain? No, you don't need to care about blockchain. Or what is crypto? Cryptography. Oh, it's not monies? No, it's not monies. But here, let's talk about cryptocurrency, and just kind of get that conversation going. And because people want to learn, they want to know things, but sometimes they're afraid to ask because they don't want to sound stupid. It's awkward admitting you don't know something. It's showing vulnerability to people that you might not know. So we just need to keep these kinds of things in mind. And then another thing that I found interesting was folks were tracking attendance and participation in discussions in user awareness programs. I had a couple of customers who were tracking this, and what they found was if a topic wasn't interesting to the users or if it wasn't relevant to their jobs, there would be a decrease in attendance and or participation in the conversation. They would just kind of sit there and fiddle with their phones and kind of ignore the IT folks who were just talking. And then something we don't really think about is delivery method. So there was this study in 2012, 2014, they did a redo of the study where they took 60 participants and split them up into 3 groups. Or I'm sorry, 3 groups. One group got a little video game to see, okay, this is how you find a malicious link. This is what a suspicious URL looks like. This is what a phishing email looks like. Another group got a text, like a wall of, like a 1-pager policy that says, oh, hey, here's information about phishing. And then the third group got a 5-minute video that explained this is phishing. And what they found was that users had a preference about which delivery method they got. Obviously, the folks giving the study thought that text was going to be the least preferred delivery method. But it turns out that even though out of those 60% or those 60 participants, about 60% of them said that they liked video games, they played video games in their off time, but very few actually preferred the game as a learning method, which is really interesting because a lot of conversations and presentations on user awareness try to talk about gamification and using game theory to improve user awareness, but it turns out our users don't like that. They're just not interested. They don't find it useful. But also something interesting, sorry, it's not clicking, there we go. Although preferences are nice and all, what they found was the delivery mechanism didn't really have a huge impact on the amount of information retained and what the users learned. What they found was there was at least a 30% improvement across all groups from where they started. So no matter what the delivery mechanism, they all learned something that was useful. And then to further drive this point home, at the beginning of the study, only 20% of those 60 people excuse me, said that they had formal security training at any point in their lives, even though they all worked full-time or part-time jobs. They were in their 20s and 30s. So that's kind of depressing to think about. Only 48 out of 60 people never received awareness training before. They don't know what to look for. So something that we consider to be common knowledge and to just kind of make sense, the majority of people don't understand. They don't know what to look for. They don't get it. So it's really important for us to spend the time on these basics. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see why not. So yeah, the question was for the recording, do I think that there would be a similar outcome in preference if we substituted presentations for video? And I think there would be. Yeah. So yeah, what we need to do is do something and then continually improve, reach out to our users, find out what they want, so that way we can keep, improving improving our security posture, and also letting our leadership know that we are demonstrating value. We're providing value by reducing the number of incidents. We are reducing the number of phishing attacks if that's possible, or, they're gaining some sort of information and trying that, they're showing interest in this. So once we have the beginning of our training and awareness program, we talk about metrics, we need to motivate our users. This is supposed to be motivating, by the way. Yeah. So how do we motivate our users to actually do what we teach them, right? Because we can design these great videos or presentations. We can solicit feedback and gather metrics. But how do we get them to do something with it? And that's kind of a trick question, because you can't actually motivate someone to do anything. What you can do is influence what people are motivated to do. So we have to find ways to influence them to stay motivated, to, be on the alert, to look out for folks who maybe don't belong in their cubicle area, people who aren't locking their machines or clearing off their desks. So that's a little tricky, because it's not their job to be, to keep things secure. That's our job. I'm like muffling with the mic, sorry. It's our job to keep the organization secure. And chances are, as they go throughout their day, they're going to get tired. We only have a finite number of resources each day. And as you answer emails, go to meetings, that resource diminishes. And that's when it's easier to get phished or let somebody into the building that should not be in the building. So how do we help them? Well, I don't know if you guys know this, but psychology is full of old white dudes, just like kind of in InfoSec. So first there is Dr. Edwin Locke and Gary Latham. And these two guys created a theory called goal setting theory. And the premise behind goal setting theory is if someone either sets a goal for themselves, or if someone who is viewed as an authority figure sets a goal for someone that's moderately difficult but still attainable, a person will stay motivated to do something that they might not have otherwise wanted to do or have any interest in doing previously. So the way that this works with what we're talking about here is we would want to reach out to leadership and other managers in other departments and explain to them, okay, this is why it's important for your people to have better security posture. You know, why don't they want to hold the door open? Why don't they, why do they want to clear their desk at the end of every day? So we meet with the other managers, talk to them about this, and then have them go and speak with their people. And those managers are viewed as legitimate authority figures because they don't know us. Usually we are in our own department, you know, our own little side of the building, and they let us be. So if we say, oh, hey, you know, our goal for you is not to have any successful phishing attempts this quarter, they're going to be like, okay, that's cool, whatever. And that'll be kind of the end of it, and you won't see a huge change. But if you have their manager or a team lead or something like that, somebody that they recognize as an authority figure, say, oh, hey, our group is in competition with another group to see who has the fewest number of phishing attempts and, you know, successful phishing attacks. Let's try to beat those other guys. Chances are that they'll stay more motivated and more vigilant than they would have otherwise. And that brings us to Stanley Milgram. So I don't know if some of you recognize Stanley Milgram. 1970s, he gave a series of studies where he would have a scientist in a room with a person, and then on the other side of the glass, he would have an actor. But the participant wouldn't know that the other person was an actor. And so every time somebody got something wrong, they would send an electric shock to the actor, and the actor would pretend to be hurt. And then every time they got a question wrong, they would increase the level of electricity sent out. So what they found was if a scientist was in the room with the participant would keep increasing the level of electricity and shock. If the scientist was on the other side of a two-way mirror, they would resist more. They would say, no, I'm not going to hurt this person anymore. This is wrong. And it's kind of the same theory in business. And no, we're not going to shock our users, Cindy. Stop. She's like giggling over there. It's kind of concerning. So what we want to do is find those legitimate authority figures, other people that they like, even informal authority figures. Maybe there's somebody on the team that others turn to and kind of mirror, because we're very social creatures. And so you find that person, you make them your ally, and then that way they'll be like, oh, so-and-so's cleaning their desk at the end of every day. Maybe I'll start doing that too. Oh, so-and-so's talking about this. Maybe I should do that too. You know, we don't want to be left out of the group. We want to be just like everybody else. How am I doing that time? Okay, cool. But we also need to be aware of motivational zappers. So there are things that even though you might follow common motivational theories, you have everything set up great, people are staying strong, eventually these things will pile up. And it only takes one person to have a combination of these factors to feel overwhelmed and then stop doing what we've tried to motivate everybody to do. And then as soon as one person stops, maybe another person stops, and then another person, then we're back to where we started. So we need to think of ways to be like, okay, what controls can we put into place to help our users when they're stressed? How do we help them when they're feeling a decreased level of morale? Because maybe your phishing attacks or your password cracking exercises make them feel bad about themselves, and they're like, whatever, what's the point? So we need to keep these things in mind and try to account for that. And one way we can do that is by helping them form good habits. So motivation is nice, but if we create habits, that's something that they will fall into naturally. So it's things that they have to be able to do both at home as well as work. And that's where the habit formation loop comes into play. So what we want to do is find a cue. And this could be something like, okay, I get an email. It needs to trigger a routine, which is, okay, this email has a link. We want them to see and look at the link to make sure that it's going to where it says it's going, right? And then we need a reward. So this can be something that's intrinsic or extrinsic. So intrinsic is something inside that makes them feel like, oh, this feels good to do. I'm doing this because I feel proud of myself for not giving up my daughter's credit card number or social security number. Or an external or an extrinsic reward is something like, okay, the department who doesn't click on these links gets a pizza party or something, something very simple. It's kind of silly. It brings up the competitiveness in them, but eventually they're like, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing this. Things that typically work, rewards, people like stickers. It doesn't even have to be really expensive. Something that Cindy and I talked about previously, actually last year at Circle City, was contact your marketing team and get like a souvenir or like a little logo guy to represent your information security group. And then, like Snorty the pig, right? Everybody loves Snorty. They want him in like different outfits and looking different ways. So if we create something like that we can give to our users when they do something good, they can put in their cubicle. Somebody walks by like, hey, how'd you get that? And they go, oh yeah, well, I did this. And then someone else is like, well, I want the little mascot guy. And then, it kind of feeds itself. So it's kind of cool. The habit has to be easy to pick up. If it's something super complicated, chances are they're not going to stick with it long enough for it to become a habit. Kind of like, at the beginning of every year, someone's like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym every day. And they do it for like the first week or two, but then they stop going. So that's what we want to avoid. What doesn't work is this set it and forget it mentality. A lot of us are like, okay, well, we need to check this box. Say we did our user awareness program and that's good enough. Or say, we wrote this really great presentation, or we bought this really fancy computer-based training with modules, and it's great because we don't have to do anything and users just view the video. You can't rely on the stickiness of the training because as soon as they leave that room, chances are they're going to lose over half of what you talked about. So they need reinforcement. You need things like posters on the wall, regular newsletters or bulletins, the mascot. And also, don't embarrass people. All that's going to do is make you look like a bully. So if somebody doesn't do something, or if they get a virus on their machine because they clicked on a suspicious looking email, don't call them out. Because chances are they're going to talk about how big of a bully you are, and you're going to lose buy-in from other people. And the chances of you having allies and other folks to help you spread your message is going to decrease. So we talked about 3 different things, metrics, habit formation, motivation. How do we bring it all together? Well, there's things you can do in the short term, immediately, and in the long term. First of all, start by having a small meeting with key stakeholders, you, your manager, maybe the CISO, if you're not the CISO, and figure out what metrics are important for your organization to track. Are you seeing like a high number of incidents that have previously gone unreported? Is your response time high? Or do you have a high number of clicks or, on phishing campaigns? Maybe people are taking forever to complete their awareness training. you know, things like that. So start tracking that information, solicit feedback from your users, find out what they find interesting, what they want help with, and then update your awareness training more than once a year, please. A lot of folks that are in charge of their own training, they set it and then kind of forget it. And then they come back once a year, update the date, and be like, yeah, we update it annually or as needed, which is annually. And then set up meetings with other leaders and find out, okay, hey, what problems are your people having? How can we help you? And then in the long term, you want to develop a roadmap. It's not fun. Most of us dislike doing roadmaps. But what we can do with that is say, okay, here's what we'll do in 6 months. Here's how we'll see if we, met our goals and how we can progress. Track those metrics that you identified. Move from annual seminars to lunch and learns or mini seminars, things like that. And I actually spoke pretty fast. So are there any questions? Yeah. That I've actually seen that I liked. What was it? Securing the Human does pretty good. I've seen a lot of people use them and really like them. That's probably the biggest one. I forget where Jason Street is now, but he does that for a lot of organizations and talks really heavily on awareness. And then if anybody else wants to share what they use, what I like to do is even though I talk faster than my slides and leave a lot of time and there might not be a lot of questions, I really value conversation. I think a lot of times we spend way too much time just having somebody stand at the podium and talk at you for an hour, and then you walk out and not really learn anything useful that you can take away right now. And what I found is when we talk with one another, we learn more and we do better. So if anybody has any recommendations for this gentleman, that would be great. And I'll shout it out for the camera so that way they can pick it up if someone watches the recording later. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So that was a great question. The question was, how big of an impact, basically, how big of an impact does culture have, right? And it's a huge impact. If you don't, you can do all of these things and have a great plan, a great roadmap, perfect metrics to track. But if upper management doesn't care and doesn't reinforce stuff, it's not going to make a lick of difference. So yeah, you need to spend a lot of time talking to people about the why. Yeah, Wolf. Yes. Yes. Yeah, the person who does that is actually Kai Rower, Kairoer. Yeah, and he does great work. He even has he has the free framework, and then he also has a book that he wrote on it. It's really good. I highly recommend it. Yeah. So the question was, how do we move folks from a compliance mindset to a security mindset? And honestly, it's going to take a lot of conversation. What really helps is really understand where the leadership group is coming from, what their concerns are, and also say, okay, well, compliance gives us part of the picture. I like to use this puzzle metaphor. It's a huge chunk of the puzzle, but it's not everything. So what we need to do is explain to them, okay, this is why it's important. Here's how it will help the organization. This is the value it provides. Use terms that they can understand and digest, because a lot of times what I've seen is information security folks who might be new to the management kind of role and environment don't know how to express that. And that's where a lot of the issues come in, is they don't know how to use words and language and concepts that the managers and CISOs and CEO and CFO and stuff like that understand. Yeah, so return on investment would be a big thing. Talk about the different metrics that you collect, why you collected them, what value it provides the company, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question was, how do you tie in the home life stuff to the work life stuff as far as security goes? So it helps reinforce the ideas. Um, One that I really like that I've heard is, what was it? Sorry, it's been a while. The Google Docs thing, right? That was huge. Everybody got the link. Everybody got fished. And it was the first time really that a lot of us have seen where everyday users are just like, whoa, it's not just a work thing. This actually impacts me at home. People can see my emails, and it's a violation of their privacy that they don't think about when they're at work and they're using their work laptop to check their emails, because they're just like, oh, well, they don't think that we're actively monitoring them, right? They don't, because if they stopped and thought about it, they would be like, wow, that's a huge invasion of my privacy. But then they go home, and if you say, oh yeah, I was monitoring your internet traffic from home and you were doing this, this, and this, they would be like, whoa, I'm not cool with that, Or if you explain something to them like, okay, if you do X, Y, Z, you're not only helping yourself, but you're also helping your family. You're teaching your kids good habits, so that way they're protecting them, especially people with small children. There's a lot of scary stuff out there, on the internet that we see on a day-to-day basis, and some of us are kind of desensitized to it almost to a point that people do not want their small children looking at. So you can say, hey, we've seen this kind of thing going around. You might want to do this at home. It'll protect you and your family. And sometimes that emotional link really helps without being gross and manipulative about it. Yeah. Oh yeah, I have nothing to hide, so I don't care if they see all my stuff. Or like, yeah, or my credit score sucks anyways. They can steal my credit. And it's like, just, I don't think they understand the true repercussions of what those things cause. They understand, okay, well, I got to cancel my bank card if it gets popped. They don't understand that, oh, someone got my social security number, my first and last name, and my address. What can they do with that? And if you explain that to them and say, okay, here's the long-term costs and what you'll have to deal with, even after you've long forgotten about it, sometimes that helps. Because a lot of them just don't know. So a lot of times what I've seen, especially when it's other family members who know nothing about computers or security, or even friends. So I live in the Tampa Bay, Florida area, and a lot of people my age aren't really tech savvy. My best friend comes to me with my goddaughter's laptop, and is like, just do the security thing you do. Fix it. Fix it. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But when they see something on the news that gets a lot of play, so like the Home Depot thing or the Target breach, there a lot of times I'll get messages and texts like, "Hey, what's going on here? How did this happen? Or, how is this going to impact me?" So that kind of thing. So kind of keep an eye on like ABC News or Fox News or whatever you watch and see, okay, these are the types of things that are being brought up on the news that people are seeing, or, oh, this is a stupid meme on Facebook that's making the rounds. It's wrong. We might want to let our users know about it. Oh, Wolf? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's a huge part of it is going back to the corporate culture. How do you get executive buy-in is you have to know your audience. Yeah. And you had a question? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wombat in particular, or hmm. Yeah.